Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro. And just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, we do it at 5 o'clock for the News Blitz. And here at 4, it's Mottek On Money, live on the air right here, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Stocks, yes, finishing higher today as the S&P 500, the NASDAQ extended a record-shattering winning streak ahead of the Juneteenth holiday tomorrow. The markets will be closed. NVIDIA back in the spotlight. The stock surging 3.5% today, moving up nearly $5 to $135 and change. NVIDIA reaching a new valuation total of nearly $3.34 trillion. Yep, you heard me, $3.34 trillion. The AI chip maker, the most valuable company by market cap in the United States, eclipsing mega cap players including Microsoft and Apple. The S&P 500 moved to 14 points, settling at a record high close today. The NASDAQ moved higher today as well by just 5 points, good enough for a record high. And the Dow managed a closing gain of 57 points to finish at 38,835. The Dow has taken a breather since it hit a record high above 40,000 about a month ago. Markets otherwise quiet today. Stocks spent most of the session moving between small gains and losses after the May retail sales report today showed consumers were more cautious about spending. With this elevated inflation situation still continuing and high interest rates as well, the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ will be closed tomorrow, June 19th, to commemorate the ending of slavery in the United States. It's a new federal holiday. Shares of major Wall Street banks are among the winners today, with Goldman Sachs moving up sharply to become the top-performing stock in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The big dog on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs shares moving up about 1.5%. Citigroup up 1.2%. B of A shares up 1.1%. Heard today from Fed Governor Adriana Kugler, expecting inflation to slow enough to enable the Fed to cut interest rates this year, but she doesn't want to move too fast, she says. Oil, meanwhile, moving higher again today, 2 days in a row on the upside, settling at the highest we've seen in 7 weeks, finding support from upbeat prospects for energy demand. Crude oil in New York up $1.24 to settle at $81.57 a barrel. And Brent crude in London, the global benchmark, moving up $1.08 to $85.33 a barrel. Both the highest now since April 30th. Amazon in the spotlight today. It's been slapped with a fine of nearly $6 million by a California labor agency, accusing Amazon of failing to sufficiently disclose productivity quotas to employees at 2 warehouses here in California in violation of a law intended to prevent worker injuries. Amazon shares closed down today to $182.81, down $1.25. Crime, of course, still a big issue here. We're going to talk about the latest incidents with the one and only Dennis ZINE. The Honorable Dennis ZINE will be on the line with us, the former L.A. City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, and current LAPD Reserve officer with more than 56 years of service to the City of Angels. He'll be joining us live later this hour on taxes and the economy and the federal budget deficit, which continues to balloon. We'll talk to Adam MICHEL at the Cato Institute later this hour. But first, on this record-shattering day on Wall Street, joining us live now, Jim HAUSBERG, Managing Director at Hightower Advisors, the HAUSBERG Group, based in Beverly Hills. Jim, thank you very much for taking the call on another up day. We saw the Dow of 57, the S&P 500 of 14, the NASDAQ of 5. Both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 stand at record highs. Looks like bond yields have eased a bit, and NVIDIA continues on a roll here. Give us your assessment of things here at the moment.
Well, as you know, Frank, we've talked many times. It's still a technology-driven market. I think out of the S&P's 15% plus or minus return year to date, about 35 to 40% of that comes from NVIDIA's gain. So we like to think that the market is spread out in terms of the returns, but make no bones about it, it's technology-driven still. It has been for some time. I think the information technology sector is up about 30% year to date. Twice as much as the S&P is overall. But all sectors are positive except real estate. And a lot has to do with the fact that the inflation numbers are coming down. The Fed's probably going to lower once, maybe twice. And earnings are coming in pretty robust, as we've seen. Margins are improving. There's a little concern out there with the unemployment rate moving up. And we saw today retail sales were slightly lower, not much movement up April and May. Certain sectors within the consumer is 70%, Frank, as we say, of the GDP and spending. And so you're seeing a little less spending on certain items, but the service side, people continue to spend on travel, going out to dinners. That stuff continues at a pretty high rate, but maybe not buying as many goods.
On there live with Jim HAUSBERG, a veteran market analyst and broker here in Southern California, the HAUSBERG Group based in Beverly Hills. And Jim HAUSBERG, let me ask you about NVIDIA, which, of course, has taken the spotlight as the most valuable company, blowing past Apple and even Microsoft now. NVIDIA up nearly $5 today at $135 and change. Of course, they had that 10-for-1 stock split recently and has continued to climb following that stock split. How much more runway does NVIDIA have, you think?
Well, it's getting a little pricey. I do know there's a very, very large ETF. The symbol is XLK, and it's a sector-specific fund in technology. And I was reading today that there's a rebalance going on Friday where they're going to be adding $10 billion, which is not a huge number anymore, of NVIDIA into this ETF and taking money off the table in Apple to rebalance. So there's a little bit of action around that. But the fundamentals of the story just remain. AI is here. AI is changing the way we live and the way we work. And companies throughout the technology space continue to spend on AI. And where they go, it always seems to come back to NVIDIA as the supplier of the microchip that really moves the engine of these companies. There are other plays out there. Microsoft, which owns a big part of some AI businesses, has traded very well also. And Apple recently has moved up on the fact that if you want to get an Apple phone or an iPad or watch, I'm not sure all the products, but if you want them AI enhanced, you're going to have to refresh and spend on a new phone, a new iPad, and a new desktop possibly. So if you want it AI enhanced, and that came out of their developer meetings a couple of weeks ago. So the stock was, trading down for the year, 10, 11%, around 170, 180. And you look today, it's 214, and it's moved up incredibly since their announcement of the AI enhancement to their products. So that's why I say AI is everywhere. It's impacting a lot of companies. And it's obviously the future in technology. We always find these areas. And, it was the internet 25 years ago, and today it's all AI.
Absolutely. And, of course, it was just about a week or so ago that Apple had that developers conference and had a bad day that day, but then started hitting record highs. And just now it's just down a couple dollars from its all-time high at 214 and change. So what about Apple here?
It's hard not to. Let me just play it safe here. I like these companies long term, but we got to have a correction, Frank. It's inevitable. I'm not sure what the reason's going to be. Maybe the Fed doesn't cut, or maybe there's some external event. But we've been in on a one-way street with this stuff for a while, and people are chasing what's hot, and they're moving away from things that aren't so well. I mean, it's hard to imagine the Nasdaq being up, 24. I'm trying to get my numbers here. 19%, and the Dow's up 3%. So is money going to go into value? Is it going to go into these industrials and move out of technology? It's certainly possible. It would be a healthy thing to see. But as of now, I just don't see it. But the valuations are getting a little stretched. The stories are hot. And momentum is a big thing on Wall Street, as you know. So longer term, I would stay with these things. I can't say I'd buy them tomorrow morning. And wait and see, and maybe wait, as I said last time, wait for a pullback, which came in a few areas, but not all of them. So continue to like the space, continue to like the market. But, we've had a big, big run.
That's for sure. On the air live with Jim HAUSBERG. And Jim, let me ask you about oil, which has suddenly seen a spurt higher as well. And certainly that wall of worry continues to be climbed everywhere you look pretty much. The oil now back above $80 a barrel. In fact, up nearly above 81 now, nearly $82 a barrel. What about oil here and the commodity space overall?
I see that Berkshire and Mr. Buffett bought more Occidental, which they keep adding to. So he's a pretty good investor. So you might want to look at that. The short-term price movements in oil are very hard to call. You would think with all the problems we're having in the Middle East with the war in Gaza that oil would be a lot higher. And if you would have made that guess last October, you would have predicted a much higher price, and it's way down. So obviously there was been the supply has increased too much. There's a little bit of a glut out there, I guess, and we'll see. But the economies are doing well globally, and to see oil move up on demand now, I think is healthy. The oil stocks themselves have done okay, 4 or 5% gain this year, maybe 8.5% the last 12 months, but they pay dividends. And you just go through the list of the big names, and ExxonMobil and Oxy and a few others, and it's a place you can invest in. Relatively low PE, relatively low price to book. They do have debt, and you get a dividend. And I'm a big fan of receiving dividends. I love companies that are increasing their dividends. I'm not saying that's going on with oil, but that's one reason to buy it. So if you want to move away from just growth, I think energy is a place to put some money.
All right, and seems like it happened a long time ago, but it just happened this morning. Fisker filing for bankruptcy. It's been a rough ride for some of the EV makers. EV startup Fisker today filing for bankruptcy protection. That was the big news ahead of the opening bell this morning. Fisker stock down about 54% on that news. Penny stock at this point, and let's see, down 2 cents to down to 2 cents, down 55%. What about the EV names aside from Fisker here now with this big news? Jim HAUSBERG, what are your thoughts about what's happening in the EV space and anything you're looking at there?
Well, I mean, Rivian is a big name. It's come way down, but seems to have bottomed around 11. They've got the capital to keep, making their cars. Fisker, obviously, I don't know the story, but they probably run out of capital. It's happened to a bunch of others. One of the biggest problems I think with the whole EV business, and I've said it before on your show, is that you drive a distance and you have to stop and charge. And they do have charging stations, as you know, and we're seeing more and more of them. But the more people that drive, the more people that have to stop. And if you're going on a decent drive, you might have to wait an hour and a half to get the car charged. And then some of these things break down, and then you have to wait even longer. So it's very unpleasant if you're going on a long drive. We all drive a lot here in California, as you know. So, Tesla's got this battery that seems to last forever, and I think Lucid has one too, and Rivian's goes pretty far. But the battery is very key in terms of, not having to stop and refuel or charge it, I should say. So I think that's a problem. And then there's too many of them out there. And, the big auto manufacturers have had trouble with their cars and not being profitable. Tesla's the winner in it and continues to be. So if you want to own a stock in that space, I'd probably stick with Tesla or some of the utility companies who are doing very well as a result. So, and AI is a big play for utility companies also. So not my favorite spot.
Are you into weird, spooky, and strange history? Horrifying History tells you about the side of history that people don't normally talk about. We tell the tales of haunted places, infamous true crimes, unsolved mysteries, the paranormal, and then we look to history to see where the truth actually lies. Want to get spooky with us?
Horrifying History, part of the Believe Network. Just search BLEAV on YouTube or wherever you listen.
But Tesla's the name.
All right, and Tesla down a couple dollars today to 184 and change. That stock has seen a rough ride, but did get a bit of a lift after Elon Musk received his $56 billion payday last week, which was quite remarkable and good for him. So we haven't heard anything more about it, but I guess the final approval hasn't been given. But so that's certainly big news. And what about gold here, Jim, which has been hovering near its all-time high right now, down $3 at 2,344. What about gold, which has been hitting record highs just at a time we've been told inflation is supposedly easing and the dollar is actually strong? What about gold here?
Yeah, it's one I've missed, but I haven't missed it for long. It's really hard to call gold, and as well as the cryptos too, right? We've talked about them from time to time. There's not a lot of usage for gold except for making jewelry. That's about it. I don't know if people around the world are spending more and more on that stuff, but probably doing well on the high end. But as a hedge, I just never know when to sell it. It's volatile at times. Weaker dollar, higher inflation, that's usually been good for gold. But I'm not a gold bug, don't own it for any clients. And, I stay away from most commodities because they're too hard to call. I'd rather focus on companies that are growing their top and bottom line and buy them at a reasonable price. And I think investors would be well served by doing that and not focusing on these commodities. That said, gold is up 12% for the year, 18% over the last 12 months. It's been a good place to be. Silver as well, copper, crude, all are higher. And I think maybe just overall a strong global economy is why we're seeing them move up.
All right, you mentioned at the beginning real estate names seem to be under pressure. What's going on there? And is that a canary in the coal mine here?
It all depends, Frank. I mean, I just read that the Blackstone sold a building in Manhattan. I don't know, on Broadway. I think the lower, lower Midtown area, for $175 million. They bought the building for $600 million, 10 years ago. So you're seeing all these vacancies in New York, although people are starting to say it's coming back. SL Green, a big New York REIT company's done very well. It's a $20 stock. It's, I think, in the 40s. I could be off a little bit, but they're doing well. I think New York comes back. I think buyers there that can handle it are going to do well. Interest rates are obviously higher. There's vacancies. People who have owned these buildings and have taken out loans and are seeing the payments double from where they were and seeing the vacancies down are in real trouble. But, that's just one city I wouldn't bet against long term. So if you can buy these buildings on the cheap, it's probably a very, very good opportunity. We'll see what happens there, but it's going to be something interesting to see as these loans come due on all this real estate, what it's going to cost to refinance, and how they're going to handle the fact that people are working from home, which is, a real issue for lots of businesses. So stay tuned on that.
That's right. And, of course, downtown L.A. also affected by all of this. And we get updates from our commercial real estate folks, and we'll have another update on that pretty soon. And at this point, Jim HAUSBERG, where are you putting money now into or taking off the table?
Continue to focus on what I focused on before, and that is buying companies that are increasing their dividends. I think those are the highest quality companies increasing their dividends 10 to 15% a year. I've been doing it on a continual basis. Those are the best stocks to own. They may not be the hottest ones. They're not, the Magnificent Seven. NVIDIA doesn't pay a dividend. Facebook just announced its first dividend last year, so we'll see what happens. Microsoft continues to increase its dividend, so we like that as well. So I would continue to focus on those types of companies. Vanguard has a dividend growth fund. I think the symbol's VIG. I hope I'm not wrong on that, but I think that's a good place to be because those are the stocks that hang in there in the tough times, which you never know when those are coming. Otherwise, I'd stay invested. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Interest rates are higher. It's great for savers, not great for borrowers. If you're a saver, you can buy 5% treasuries today for a year out. You get into the corporate world, you get into the 6%, 6.5%, 7%, high yield 8%. And with that, with a package of equities, S&P type of names, I think investors can get 7 to 8% returns, and I think that's going to be here for a while. So I feel very good about the capital markets.
Terrific, Jim. Thanks very much for taking the call today. Wish you a good break tomorrow and hope to talk to you again very soon. That is Jim HAUSBERG, Managing Director at Hightower Advisors, the HAUSBERG Group based here in Beverly Hills. Jim, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank. Always like being on with you.
Likewise, Jim. Thank you very much. Folks, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate. And Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby, ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with the insurance companies, and if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of that injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process, and the team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone under the word accident. That number, 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues in 790 KBC. Another record-shattering day for the stock market, with both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 continuing on its record-shattering winning streak. The S&P 500 of 14 to 5,487. The NASDAQ of 5 at 17,862. The Dow also higher, up 57 points at 38,835. But the Dow has simmered down after hitting its record high at around 40,000 just about a month ago. The yield in the 10-year note is now eased to 4.23%. NVIDIA continues on a roll, up nearly $5 today at $135 and change. The stock's been moving up since that 10-for-1 stock split recently. Apple shares pulling back from its record high, down more than 2 at $214 and change. Amazon down $1.25 at $182.81. Fisker down 2 cents to 2 cents. A drop of 55% on a report right out of the gate this morning from Reuters that Fisker filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, pointing Henrik Fisker's second independent automotive act into what looks like the same dramatic close as his first act, the Chapter 11 filing, as opposed to Chapter 13, suggesting company efforts to stay in business by shedding assets and working out deals with creditors. That's according to Autoblog now. So Fisker, according to reports we got today, did file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, and the stock lost 55% of its value. Tesla down $2.58 at $184.80. Looks like the other EV companies took a hit today on the Fisker news. Checking the cryptos now, Bitcoin up about 800 at 65,000. Ethereum moving up as well slightly to 3,476, and Doge at 12 cents. Mottek On Money continues in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. President Biden and former President Trump set to debate on June 27th, coming up fast here. One item that's certain to come up is tax policy. President Biden has flat out said he's going to be raising taxes. President Trump says he wants to lower them. Let's bring in Adam MICHEL now at the Cato Institute Budget Policy Director. Adam, thanks very much for taking the call. Coming up here in about less than 10 days now, this big debate, and certainly tax policy, as you've written recently, will be in focus. Size things up for us as we head to that big event.
Well, thanks for having me on. You're right. The debate will most certainly touch on taxes and tax policy, largely because the big 2017 tax cuts that were passed with Republicans in the House and the Senate and signed by President Trump largely expire at the end of 2025, raising taxes on individuals by something like 10%, which is a pretty significant tax increase on your average family of four. And so the question is, what will Congress do? What will the president at the time be able to do? And as you said, Biden wants to, depending on the day, depending on what he says, either let them expire or extend some of them and let other parts expire. And President Trump likely wants to extend those tax cuts, but has floated the idea of paying for them with tax increases elsewhere, like through tariffs.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. We haven't seen anything like this since 1984, when former Vice President Walter Mondale, in that debate with the then incumbent President Reagan, flat out said that he was going to raise taxes. And of course, President Reagan won, I think, 49 out of the 50 states in a landslide victory. The contrast here is going to be pretty stark this time around, right?
Yes, I would expect it to be quite stark. If they can be nailed down on their specific policies, the options on one side are keep taxes low, and the other side is raise them as much as the economy can bear, or more.
They're live with Adam MICHEL at the Cato Institute. So we've taken a look here, and I'm on board based on your latest article here. Wrote a tax reform agenda that includes the best parts of the 2017 tax cuts and jobs I see, while eliminating special interest loopholes and other subsidies in the tax code, all while remaining revenue neutral. Is this getting some attention there?
Well, that's the hope. Is this plan that I've put together tries to get Republicans in Congress and President Trump to think bigger than they did in 2017. Think about how if we got rid of all of the junk in the tax code, all of the special credit.
Are you into weird, spooky, and strange history? Horrifying History tells you about the side of history that people don't normally talk about. We tell the tales of haunted places, infamous true crimes, unsolved mysteries, the paranormal, and then we look to history to see where the truth actually lies. Want to get spooky with us?
Horrifying History, part of the Believe Network. Just search BLEAV on YouTube or wherever you listen.
And deductions and subsidies for special industries and different types of activity. If we got rid of all of it, how low could we lower taxes? And we could lower them to the lowest rates we've seen in 100 years. We could lower top marginal tax rates to 25%. We could get the business tax rates down to some of the lowest in the world. We could cut capital gains and dividends taxes, eliminate the estate tax, and it would be massively pro-growth. Sort of making the United States the most attractive place to do business, to hire, and expand here domestically.
All right, we're spending a day in which we got the report from Budget Watchdog estimates that the national debt exceed $50 trillion by the year 2034. What's your reaction to that big news here today?
Yeah, well, the national debt is the big sort of shoe that has yet to drop. We currently have $2 trillion deficits, and no one in Washington seems serious about addressing them. And all of those numbers assume that these tax cuts do expire, and tax revenue does go up by another $450–500 billion a year. And so if we keep the tax cuts, we keep taxes low, the without cutting spending, the fiscal situation gets that much worse. And so Congress needs to get serious about actually cutting spending, and that's really the only path forward. There's no way to sort of tax our way out of this fiscal hole.
Is there any serious effort at this point to rein in spending, which seems to be essentially a runaway at this point?
There's proposals for fiscal commissions in Congress to start trying to put numbers to these type of things. But usually when Congress starts talking about commission, it means they're not really ready to make the hard decisions and have those real conversations amongst themselves, but instead they're kicking the conversation to someone else. So unfortunately, no, there isn't a serious conversation going on in Washington about the sort of fiscal problem that we have ahead of us. And my concern is that we're going to sleepwalk into a fiscal crisis that will end with no other option but economy-crushing tax increases like we saw throughout Europe after the financial crisis. And the lesson we learned there is the countries that did respond to those crises by cutting spending instead of increasing taxes actually performed better and actually reduced their debt to GDP ratio and came out of the crisis much stronger. And so those are the lessons that Congress needs to take from sort of how other countries have addressed these problems in the past.
Economy question that's pretty ominous, but I'm sure you've taken a look at the difference between the two proposals on the table here. President Biden voting to increase taxes and President Trump voting to lower taxes, and that's something that everybody should take a look at.
Fortunately, one near USC, a 19-year-old USC student now under arrest on suspicion of murder after a homeless man was stabbed to death at the university's Greek Row, allegedly after the stabbing victim broke into the vehicles at the scene. Joining us live now is the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, and still an LAPD reserve officer. Dennis ZINE on the line. Thanks very much for taking the call, Dennis. First of all, your reaction to this latest incident.
Frank, I'm not surprised. These situations continue to happen. And in the 2018 year, the 2012 to 2018, they changed everything. They took the criminal justice system and basically turned it upside down. So there's no consequences. So what we have is a continuing saga of crime and violence, and the repercussions are negligible, if any. It's a continuing battle. You've got the propositions, 36, 47, 109, 57. You got Gascon. You put all these together in this formula, and what you have is a disaster. So what we have is basically the criminal justice system in the state of California and particularly Los Angeles is a disaster. Plain and simple, it's a disaster.
All right, so now this reform package will be on the ballot, reforming Prop 47. What are your thoughts about what voters will be facing in November?
Well, the voters were duped when these initiatives passed back 2012, 14, 2018. They were duped. And it would basically cleaned out the prison system. It turned incarceration into no incarceration. In other words, there were no consequences. The bottom line, there were no consequences for committing crimes, violent crimes, nonviolent crimes. And we see the impact on society. We look at a society that has to be safe and regulated and people responsible. But you have a shrinking police department. The numbers came out today. LAPD is at 8,038 officers. They need 10,000. So what you have is 911 call dispatchers are short. So you'll wait on the line to 911 answer. Response time's delayed. If you can get a unit, you got to make the report online. Stations are closed in the evenings. It's a disaster that is impacting the people of Los Angeles City and Los Angeles County. And to combine that with all these issues that took place, the 109s, the 47, et cetera, Gascon is at the helm who decides who's going to get prosecuted or not going to get prosecuted. And he's got like 98% of his deputy district attorneys vote against him. And if people continue to have him as district attorney with all the other problems we have, it's basically a lawless environment. It's like the Old West. It's a lawless environment, and you have to run and escape. So you have, whether it's an actor or it's a common person who has a job and a family and tries to make ends meet, we're all impacted by this. And the problem is it's not improving. It's going to be critical this election if we're going to find impact that's positive or negative.
On the Air Live with the Honorable Dennis Zine, and of course, in November, voters will have a choice between Gascon and a veteran federal prosecutor, Nathan Hochman. Give us your assessment about how that race is shaping up.
Well, I know both of them. I know Gascon's history from LAPD to Arizona to San Francisco, where he destroyed San Francisco Police Department. The district attorney, Jackie Lacey, was our district attorney, did a great job, very effective in law enforcement, cooperating with that and helping victims. If they decide to keep him, then I'd say people need to find another county, if not another state, to reside, because you're just going to have continuing lawlessness, whether it's your cattle converter stolen or whatever the case may be. If I encourage people to make crime reports, the only way they know what's happening is when they make crime reports, but they're not recruiting. People don't want to join LAPD. And the current hiring, you can start at 86,000 up to 117,000 to join LAPD, depending on your education, background, et cetera, from 86,000 to 117,000, and a rent subsidy for you paying rent, and people don't want to join. But again, we're down to 8,038 officers where we're supposed to have 10,000. It's really a lawless environment. And people say, should I get a CCW, carry concealed weapon? I say, yes, you should, to protect you and your family. And I have many people who are anti-gun, but they're realizing that you can't depend on local agencies because they're under-deployed to protect you and your family. And it's a sad situation for the City of Angels to bear this brunt of these ridiculous laws and a prosecutor who doesn't believe in prosecution, doesn't believe in incarceration. So many of the listeners, I'm sure, are victims of crime. They're the ones who can really speak forward exactly what's happened to them, how they've been impacted by this situation that's going on way too long.
Must be heartbreaking for you to have that assessment here, given your longtime service to the city at City Hall, and as well as on the streets and ongoing as a reserve officer. But thanks for telling it like it is. And the situation, you mentioned the catalytic converter. We saw an actor killed in downtown Los Angeles, and now this USC student, apparently, we don't know all the details, but stabbed someone he spotted breaking into somebody's car. He ended up getting arrested. This is the sort of thing that's happening out there. What is your advice for people who kind of come upon situations, either their cars being broken into, or these confrontations are happening more often nowadays?
You can only use deadly force, a life-threatening situation. You can't use deadly force to prevent a crime. If it's a crime of violence, you can't shoot a burglar unless your life is in danger. You can't shoot someone who's stealing a car unless your life's in danger. It's only taking a life to save a life. You can't shoot people to preserve property, to protect property. You're going to get prosecuted. And I don't know the situation about the SC, the stabbing, but clearly car burglaries, break-ins are continuing. I understand in San Francisco, people are told, don't leave anything in the car, leave your windows open so they don't break the windows to get in the car. I mean, it's really, Frank, it's sad to see we have a lawless society in Los Angeles, in the state of California. I don't blame the taxpayers at all, but it's our elected officials who are not doing what it needs to be done to protect all of us in the city and in the state of California. And that's a sad commentary. And one more step, the chief of police, Mike Moore, who retires, where does he go? He moves to Tennessee. What does that tell you when the chief of police, who spent many years in Los Angeles County, moves to Tennessee? It's absolutely incredible how people can vote to continue this plague of crime and violence that continues every single day. And then you don't have enough police officers to even respond. And if you call 911, you're lucky if you get them to answer on the 10th or 11th ring because there's not enough dispatchers. They're short all over. So turn to your city council and turn to the mayor and say, what are you doing to protect us and our families and our businesses? Smash and grabs, street takeovers, it's out of control. And hopefully this upcoming election in November will make some changes. If not, my suggestion is find another state to live in where you can feel safe and raise your family in a safe environment, not live in fear.
On the line with Dennis ZINE, the Honorable Dennis ZINE, and we talked about this last week or so. California Democrats playing dirty tricks in response to bipartisan efforts to place that measure to reform of Prop 47 on the November ballot in favor of other public safety bills. I see many law enforcement groups are pushing for that reform measure on the ballot, as well as the reform measures that are being talked about in Sacramento. Have you had a chance to consider this, and what is your message for Sacramento here?
Well, my message to Sacramento is you better get your act together if you like being elected office, whether you're an assembly member or a state senator or the governor of the state of California. The state is bankrupt, number one, so they wasted all those billions of dollars, and then we've got continuing crime and violence. But I don't know where the state legislators think their responsibilities are. Responsibility with each and every one of us, the people of California, our counties, our cities. They're responsible. They're not doing their job. I would clean them all out and start all over with some good people who really care, because they don't care. The influence that they have up there is all for, it seems, the bad guy, and forget the law-abiding taxpayer that goes to work, comes home with the family, has dinner, and worries about the car getting stolen or the tools out of their truck. It's really sad. And I hate to talk about it over and over and over, but Frank, it's not getting better. And when I see the statistics come out today, 8,038 officers where they're supposed to have 10,000, that is incredible. And that's just getting worse.
Extremely under-policed, and as you mentioned, takes a long time for a 911 call to get answered. And when it is answered, oftentimes they say, "Oh, just fill something out online," right? What is the response time nowadays?
I don't have the number, but I'm sure it's extensive. Once you get that 911, they're supposed to answer the 911 call real quick. It doesn't happen because they're so short of dispatchers. So if they don't answer it by the first, second ring, it's going to ring. I know people have waited 10 minutes for them to answer the 911 call. 10 minutes. And
Yep.
That's ridiculous. But this is what's happening in this Los Angeles. So God help us, because obviously our politicians aren't caring for us.
The Honorable Dennis ZINE on the line with us here live on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon. And we're going to stay on this crime story and Prop 47 reform and the whole works right here. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. And this is Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
Every story eventually comes to an end. This June, hear the final episode of Season 2 of the hit podcast series In the Red Clay, Durham. In the Red Clay tells the unbelievable true story of Billy Sunday Burt, the most dangerous man in Georgia history. In the podcast that people are calling riveting, incredibly moving, captivating, and addicting. Binge Seasons 1 and 2 of In the Red Clay now, wherever you listen.